So Leviticus 17 and 18, or 18 and 19, is where many people think the problems with Leviticus really lie. They're probably the first verses in the book that people think of. The only verses they may be aware of in the book of Leviticus, here in chapter 18. What is this all about then? There's so much to say, both biblically and pastorally, particularly around the issue of same-sex relationships. Leviticus 18:22 has been seen as a kind of proof text of what the Bible says about homosexuality. And proof texts are often used negatively, or the word is used negatively, because people are sort of saying, well, you're just picking a verse out of context to prove something that you've already decided. And obviously that's not something that we want to do. We want to read the Bible in its own context in order to understand then what it means for us today. Leviticus isn't, though, about random laws that can be taken out of context like that, but as we've been seeing, it's about the holiness of God. And it's about the way that he is then shaping his people in order that they can live in relationship with him. And one of the key things that keeps coming up, there's various refrains, but one of them is that be holy because I am holy is the key one, but also that they are to be holy because they belong to God, because they've been rescued out of Egypt, and therefore he gets to shape their lives as his rescued people. And they then become holy by being like him, and then also by being unlike the other nations around them who haven't been rescued by God out of slavery in Egypt. And if you look in chapter 18, verses 1 to 4, verses 1 to 5, that sets the context for this, which is saying, do not be like the people of Egypt and where you've come from, and the people of Canaan where I am taking you to. You're to be different from them. And then what follows in chapter 18 seems to be highlighting particular ways in which they need to be different from the practices of these other nations around them. But why then focus on sex in particular? Why focus on sexual sin? Is this just sort of another example of the Bible's obsession with these things? Well, the key thing to understand is that sex is about belonging to another person. Sex is about belonging to another person. It's interesting to note who it is said that incest dishonours. Okay, in verses 6 to all the way down to verse sort of 18 or around there. Do not have sexual relations with your father's wife. That would dishonour your father. Now, this isn't just a sort of patriarchal thing. The whole chapter is addressed to men, but actually in the context of the Pentateuch, we know that the reciprocal way of thinking about it, as if it were addressed to women, is just as much in view. And we know that because of Genesis 19, where Lot's daughters do the kinds of things which are prohibited here to Lot, and the same kind of language. And that's clearly not good. The result of that is the nation of Moab and the nation of the Ammonites, who are clearly not Israel's friends. So, but you see the point. The point is, who do these things dishonour? They don't just dishonour you personally, and they don't just dishonour the person that these things happen to. They dishonour the person that the person is married to, or when it's within a family, a parent or a child. That there is dishonour that goes beyond the person. And that's because sex is about creating a one flesh relationship. That's how God has set things up in creation. That he has said the two will become one flesh, chapter 2 of 24 in Genesis. Which in turn reflects the church's union with Christ. Do you see? So we don't belong to ourselves, our bodies are not our own. In marriage and in sex, two become one, so that we belong to each other, and the rest of the Bible makes that clear. That's a reciprocal thing. It's not just that women belong to men or just that men belong to women. It is a reciprocal thing. Our bodies belong to one another, and that reflects how the church belongs to Christ, Ephesians 5. And so 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 19 and 20, you are not your own, you were bought at a price, therefore honour God with your body. The point is, we don't get to decide what to do with our bodies because God is the creator, and he has made sex and marriage, he's designed them to model and to proclaim the gospel. So the faithfulness of sex, of marriage between a man and a woman, there's difference there, remember, between a man and a woman. The Christ is not the church, and the man and the woman therefore are not the same as one another. They are different, coming together in marriage. So we model that in marriage if we're married. We actually also model that in a different way if we're single, because both married people and also single people are called to faithfulness to what God has given us in creation. Both are called to faithfulness, do you see, in different ways. Because the goal in the end isn't marriage. The goal is intimacy with Christ in eternity forever, where no one will be given in marriage, as Jesus says in the Gospels. So therefore, that is the goal for us. That therefore is the gospel that we need to keep holding out to the world. The goal of intimacy with Christ. That is what is on offer in him, in the face of death, in the face of pain and uncertainty. And how much do we know that to be the case at this time? We need to keep proclaiming this gospel of intimacy with Christ in eternity. And we need to keep modelling that faithfully, even when times are pressured and hard on our relationships, whether we're single or married. We are modelling the gospel that we are then proclaiming to this lost world that so desperately needs to hear it. So let's keep doing that.